Welcome to Transforming and Thriving with best friends Brooke and Stacie,
a podcast dedicated to women sharing their inspirational stories.
Welcome. We are so excited to have you here. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Stacie. Today, we're diving into something very special to us, the reason behind our podcast and the purpose that drives us.
Yes, we want to share a little bit more behind the curtains because we feel it is so important to always be grounded in your why. We will talk about what inspired us and the foundation of this podcast, this space we want to hold for women.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to start by sharing for a minute how Transforming and Thriving was actually born. I've published some books, so my initial idea is one that is much more familiar to me and more in my wheelhouse and my comfort zone, since I've always labeled myself as better at writing than speaking, which I know is a self-limiting belief, but I've just always been more comfortable writing. So my initial idea was to publish a book that included women's stories of resilience and their stories of overcoming life challenges. I had recently been a part of a multi-author book in which every chapter was written by a different author. So my idea was initially based on that format. I thought about interviewing everyday women and having them share their stories. So each story would have a chapter in the book with the aim of getting a diversity of women from all walks of life and all types of transitions or traumas faced. So there would be stories that everyone could relate to in some way and benefit from. I personally know so many inspiring women who have navigated some intense setbacks and challenges with humility and grace. And I desperately wanted to get their stories out there to the general public in some way. I also had recently enrolled in this amazing course created by Elevate the Globe called Rise Up, which was all about coaching individuals to align with their purpose and step into their truest potential. The program was really awesome. It had tons of personal and spiritual practices that were a part of it, like Kundalini, encouraging healthy lifestyle and eating. They even had amazing smoothie recipes, as well as coaching on building a spiritual business that truly makes an impact. And the Elevate the Globe girls also had a podcast that I had listened to for a long time and loved. And I had mentioned to Brooke how much I was getting out of the course that I was in and how I wanted to create something. I remember I threw out my ideas first, centered around creating something where women share their stories. And, my first thought, of course, was a book, like I said, but it could be anything like a website or podcast. It just needed to be some sort of platform for women to share their inspiring stories. Brooke, you can add to this and share your experience, but I remember you getting super excited about the podcast idea in particular. What was your memory of that and how our brainstorming led to where we are now?
Yeah, I remember you being really excited about the program, and I loved hearing you share all the amazing ideas that were coming out of it. I also remembered that you brought up the idea of doing a project together, and the idea of the podcast as one of your examples immediately intrigued me. And, I felt really connected to the idea of highlighting strong women and sharing what inspired them to move through difficult times. As you said, I know so many women in my own life that have navigated different challenges and they've inspired me. And so what a great idea to highlight them and, create this ripple effect of positive, meaningful change.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, an opportunity to spend more time with you was fantastic. It sounded great. But there was so much more to this immediate feeling I got. I actually started this year off, as you probably remember, with the goal to do more of the things that pushed me outside my comfort zone, things that were maybe a little scary or new for me, and really just to try new things in general.
Yeah.
So not only did the idea of a podcast align with my personal growth goals to do something that stretched my comfort zone, it also aligned with many of my values that we both have shared. I truly believe in having a growth mindset, supporting others, and being a part of a positive, strong community. I think it's so important. And previously, I accessed that through yoga, meditation practice, my family, friends. And now I can add this podcast as a source of support.
Me too. I'm so grateful we get to do this together. It's so important to feel a sense of community, validation, empowerment, and support from others. I know I've gone through some things where I would have loved to hear a podcast with women who had gone through something similar that I could relate to. It's so easy to feel isolated during tough times, but hearing stories like that reminds us that we're not alone. Like I mentioned, though, this has and still does feel totally out of my comfort zone. I'm trying to gain confidence and move past my self limiting belief that I can't speak as well as I write. And I know we grow the most by challenging ourselves. So, this is actually a great example of what the podcast is all about.
Yeah, that is really true. We do have to question the beliefs or limits we put on ourselves. So stepping outside your comfort zone really does push you to find those answers. And I'm super proud of you for doing that.
Oh, ditto.
And and I do feel like it helps you to be the best version of yourself. I've learned so much already from the guests we've recorded so far. They are so inspiring. I am really loving how each episode we're able to highlight an individual woman's story and learn how they are continuing to do the work that's not easy. I feel like their messages really will create a positive ripple, as I said before, and inspire others.
Totally. And the birth of the name of our podcast was inspired by symbols that really represent our why behind its creation. One of the core messages we want to share is that transformation is possible, hence, how a butterfly became part of our logo. Butterflies represent transformation and strength as they undergo metamorphosis, emerging as something beautiful and new. And just like butterflies, the women we feature have undergone significant transformations or are still undergoing significant transformations. Their stories remind us that change, while often difficult, can lead to incredible growth. So, butterflies represent the transforming part of transforming and thriving. I have a strong personal connection to butterflies, but I'll share more about that in our episode when we delve into symbols a bit more.
Another symbol that became part of our logo is the lotus flower. Just like the lotus flower, which grows beautifully out of muddy waters, we can emerge stronger and more vibrant from our own struggles. It's such a powerful symbol. Stacie and I both actually have lotus tattoos, different ones, but we actually got them together in the midst of both of us going through major life changes and transitions. And it was a really powerful and meaningful symbol for both of us. It represents a shared value of resilience and growth. So it has personal significance for us and a cool meaning that perfectly aligns with what we aim to share on this podcast.
Yeah. Another thing that is really important to us about this podcast is the community that we're striving to build. We want listeners to feel connected and supported. Our hope is that when someone listens to these stories, they find inspiration and motivation to face their own challenges. We want to share the message that no one has to go through tough times alone.
That is such an important message that we want our listeners to feel a sense of community and that they aren't alone. We want our listeners to feel empowered to keep going and doing the work with support. Each episode is a reminder that resiliency isn't about never falling down or having difficult times. It's about getting back up and learning from those experiences. And every woman's story is a true testament to the ongoing work that goes into living a resilient life. The work is ongoing. It's a process and takes strength and inspiration to fuel you to keep going. It does take courage to face adversity and share your journey with others. So we have been so grateful to our guests for their openness and vulnerability. And it makes this podcast so meaningful. Their stories can truly resonate with anyone going through similar struggles.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I'd love to just speak to listeners and remind you about the power of sharing your own story. Whatever you've gone through, whether it's a trauma, a tragedy, some sort of a life transition, you never know who you might inspire by being open about your journey. We encourage everyone to reflect on their own experiences and consider how they can transform their challenges into motivation.
So I'd like to end with one of my favorite quotes by Lala Delia I found online years ago. Transmutation. Grapes must be crushed to make wine. Diamonds form under pressure. Olives are pressed to release oil. Seeds grow in darkness. Whenever you feel crushed, under pressure, pressed, or in darkness, you're in a powerful place of transformation and transmutation.
Ooh, I really like that quote. Thank you all for joining us today. We are so excited to be officially launching next week with our first 2 episodes. We can't wait to share these amazing stories with you. We would love for you to stay connected and up to date with our episodes. So follow us on Instagram and make sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app. We're all in this crazy life together, so let's move through it together. See you there.